everybody. Welcome to this episode of Alien Strand Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Ledesma, and welcome to today's show. It's going to be an interesting one today, that's for sure. So we're going to start diving into this here in just a minute. But I want to welcome you guys to Alien Strand Podcast. I'm glad you guys made it to this podcast here today. You know, we're working hard, very hard on getting a lot of information to you guys as it comes in. All right. So, I mean, today's I'm going to be talking about some extraterrestrials and the children of extraterrestrials, right? But I'll get into that in a minute. But I want to welcome everybody to Alien Strand Podcast. I'm glad you guys are listening and watching out there. I'm actually on 4 or 5 channels right now, and just trying to get it going. We're actually live on the audio section as well, so catch us on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all those good ones that's out there. All right, so we've getting a lot of response on the middle part 3, the film. Now it's done. I'm just kind of doing the final editing touches. The people that were in the film were the first ones to see this film as it came out. All right. So we haven't checked it out. It'll be coming out pretty soon. I promise you guys for sure. All right. So, if you didn't catch our past podcast, check them out. It's Subconscious Manifesting, and then Past Lives, Future Lives with June DeYoung. All right. So, we got into some really good, just nice conversations with June, and we were able to talk about a lot of her experiences that she had about the past lives and all that good stuff that comes along with it, man. Go catch those audio podcasts and video podcasts on Patreon. I'm going to be updating the Subconscious Manifesting here maybe in a day or so. I really need to redo that one because it just glitched so badly. I didn't even realize it did that, all right? But you know what? Today's podcast, children of aliens, man. How does this happen? And does this happen? And I'm going to dive into this a little bit today. I'm going to learn a little bit of something today. If you didn't know, if you're new to ufology, well, welcome to ufology, and welcome to, what the possibilities of abductions could possibly be, and what the things that people go through, because these are what a lot of my films talk about, is these abductions and then what happens afterwards. Now, it's very rare that after an abduction that they get to experience if they had any extraction of DNA or eggs or anything like that, or sperm samples so they can make these alien children, right? But there are a few instances and a few stories out there I'm going to talk about tonight. And I hope you guys stick around and just kind of listen and watch what's going on. If you're out there, if you want to chime in, and I'll put your little comments down there. I'll see if I can answer some questions for you. I really appreciate you guys watching here tonight. Now, don't forget the middle tetralogy, like I just talked about. The middle part 1, part 2 is out, and part 3 will be out pretty soon. All right. We're like I said, I'm working very hard into getting a lot of that out there. Of course, the middle part 2 is on Skylight One channel. Go check it out there on Facebook. Go check it out. I'll put a link to this film. You need to watch part 2 in order to start getting into part 2 and start part 3. And then our last film is going to be part 4, right? Which is going to be a really, really good one. All these films are, because it does talk about the abduction process, things that have happened to people after witnessing an extraterrestrial craft, right? And it's not easy for folks to tell their stories, right? And even in my second and third films, you are going to see how their expressions are while they're telling you the stories, and how heartfelt it is to them, and how scared they are to tell these stories of abductions and things like that. And so, and when you watch these films, you really get into the people and all the true stories that they're telling you about everything that's happening out there. Hi, Rosie. How you doing? Rosie's out there watching. Man, she had a beautiful fire out there. I saw your fire out there. Yeah, it's a nice evening to have a nice fire outside in the great open plains out there. She's enjoying life out there. We love her to death, man. Alien Strand Disclosure Project. As well, if you want to be a part of the Alien Strand Disclosure Project, check us out there. Go join us. Remember, follow all the rules, and also, just make sure that you fill out all the information, all of it, and then we'll get you in if you want to learn ufology. That's what this group is. Learning ufology is not nothing else. this is what it is. It's basically one big class of ufology, and this is all we post. We don't post anything else or conspiracy theories either. It's all ufology, right? And Bigfoot, and unknown, paranormal. We'll put a lot of that stuff, but we do break down quantum physics, all those good things that come with science, with Terry Lynch, myself, and everybody involved with Amy Strand's Closer Project. Chris Hamill. Everybody out there just throws it out there. And we really appreciate them for bringing their stories and things out tonight. Now, when it comes to these abductions and for these people that were on my films, a lot of them were different instances of exactly what happened to them. It wasn't all the same, right? Everything was just a little different. And and it's kind of hard for them to explain it, but it's got to be kind of hard for me to explain each story, but you'll see those in those films now. But there's a process that happens when these people do experience, or some that do get abducted do experience this as well, so and this subject is very touchy. And a lot of people go through this, and it's hard for them to tell their stories of what happened to them. You know what I'm saying? So, a Facebook user says, I'm glad this subject is with children abduction by them. No stories are the same. And that's exactly right. No story is exactly the same. But, and there is a lot of processes that how this happens to people, on their, I hate to say it this way, but it's almost like a journey. Once these people get abducted, male or female, it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be Rh negative. I know that Rh negative is the majority of a lot of these abductees that have come forward, right? These are the people that come forward. That's how they get these numbers, right, of abduction cases, right? So, but there's a lot of them that are female, of course, and there's a lot of egg extraction that happens to them, and I've told stories about that in the past, and the hardest part is what comes next, or what comes after, right? After these abductions. So I'll put it to you this way. So this is how the process of an alien abduction usually happens in majority of 99% of the stories that you're going to hear out there of alien abduction, right? So alien abduction is not something to really play with. In other words, saying that, I know a lot of folks say, man, they come and take me any day. No, a lot of times you don't want that, because there's a lot that comes with it. It messes with your psychological being of yourself, right? Because something happened to you. Right. And it usually starts with visual, right? Visual is going to be the first thing that happens when you see a UFO craft in the sky, right? So you're gonna be seeing the visual, right? And then usually after the visual, and this is by going by what I've studied on people and how this happens to them as far as the abduction process, right? So it's usually the visual that they see first, and then right after that, they usually go into some kind of paralysis state, and then there's an approach that comes along with it, right? So the approach is when these extraterrestrial beings or visitors, they will start coming up to the vehicle, or even if you're walking or if you're hiking, that this is exactly what you're going to see, right? So somebody out there says it's very beneficial to hear the other people's stories of abductions. It validates their experiences, and that's exactly true. And this is what we're here to talk about today. It's those experiences that people need to know, and how it counts, because it does count, right? And then after the approach, the paralysis state comes in, they come take you, and then the abduction process begins, right? Now, once you're in that last stage of the abduction itself, it's usually you're going to be in a paralysis or some kind of a sleep mode, right? To where you're not going to remember a lot of these things that have happened to people, because like on my third film, The Middle Part 3, we have one of our ASDP representatives. Her name is Regina Palmer. I mean, things happened to her as well, and she wasn't aware if it did happen. She saw their laser beams, she saw things that might have happened to her, and then until she woke up in pain the next day, that's what gave her the idea that something did happen, and then there was a dissection that happened with her, right? So these things are the processes that people go through when the actual abduction begins, right? And of course, we always see them in the films, things like that, and then they're usually pretty close, to what happens on an abduction, but sometimes in the films you see them, they're coherent, they're screaming, they're yelling, but most of the times they're in a state of paralysis, to where there's no movement whatsoever in that actual abduction state, right? So it's one of those things, Mr. Cherry Lynch is out there from Oregon Research, and he's watching tonight, from the middle. He says hello to everybody. But it's while I was talking about this, these are the processes that happen to people. And you've got to remember, this is it, the visual, the approach, and then the abduction. So we have to learn of the exact things that happen, and this is like 99% of the time that this is what happens. They always remember, because after going through some kind of when they go through regression, a regression session, and then they start seeing the visual, they start seeing the approach, they start seeing the actual abduction as it was happening. So majority of the times their eyes are open, right? They're hearing, they're coherent, because they can hear everything that's coming and it's happening during this actual abduction, right? And these are the processes that happen, right? And for those of you that are new to this, just kind of think about that. When you start reading a lot of these stories, that this is exactly what happens to people one by one, right? And I'm not here to scare anybody or do anything like that, but this is how my research and other people's research that I've read, that this is exactly what they experience, right? Or what they write down of exactly what happened to them, right? Of course, and then the next step is going to be the loss of time, right? Majority of the time, they were saying that, like on my first film, he says, I was driving, it was daytime, and all of a sudden, the snap of my finger, it was nighttime. We lost 2 hours of freaking time, right? And this is exactly what happens during an actual abduction, right? And how do we, in other words, how do we wrap our minds around to know exactly what happened at this pivotal moment of time, right? To where we think, okay, maybe I fell asleep, or maybe I blacked out for that minute or so. And it's just one of those things that I haven't been able to, people can't still pinpoint the exact reason why the time is like, it's in a time lock. Let's just say that way, right? It's almost like in a time lock. Sometimes they get abducted and their watches just stop moving. Everything stops moving. Just think of it this way, like some sort of suspended animation, right? And this is exactly what they go through. Now, we have a Snack Bitch out there says, I wish I had my memories after I stopped recording. I only had a minute of video for some reason. I stopped recording the second time. I was actively watching it and completely conscious. She did have this experience because she noted it on one of our Alien Strand Disclosure Project pages about that there was a piece there that was missing, right? So how do you explain the loss of time, right? And she says as well, she goes, 4 hours went by after I thought I was nodding off for a second. The only thing I know, I was wearing pants and something went up my leg and scooped a chunk of skin out, right? So this is part of the process of loss of time, right? Because you don't know what's happening. You are like in a suspended animation when this happens. In our minds and our subconscious or our conscious, just like we're asleep, right? What I talked about subconscious manifestations, right? It's like when you're in your sleep realm or you're asleep, it's like there is no time. Time stands still. I don't know if you ever noticed it. I'm going to bring this back just for a second. When you're in your dream, do you ever see anybody look at their watch and say, oh man, what time is it? Or you're looking at the clock on the wall? No, I've never seen that. I've never heard anybody talk about that in their dreams, right? Because there is no time. time is irrelevant in that part of your subconscious, right? So let's say that these extraterrestrials can actually tap into that subconscious sort of realm, and they put you in a suspended animation in a different realm, right? And when I'm talking about suspended animation, people don't know that. That's when you're locked in. You're like your hands are stuck. Your facial expression is moved, and it's like you're asleep, but you're awake, right? So that's exactly what that is. And this is me talking of what I've read and what I've studied and how I've seen people's stories break down of exactly what happens to them, right, during that time. And me personally, a lot of times they can't remember the suspended animation. They can't remember anything like that, only that they lost that time. And it felt like a second, right? And that's what it was, right? So it's like she's saying right now, she's saying the next step of hyporegression, I'm looking for someone actively now that I can come to terms with. Yes. And you will find somebody out there. Somebody will help you out there in that area. You know, there is a lot of people out there that do help with regression therapy. And that's what unlocks a lot of these memories that are locked in during this abduction. You got to remember this. This is during an abduction. So there's some things that you can't change after it's been done, right? And it's crazy, but it's happening in the now, right? Facebook user says, time stops the abduction at times when we wake up, we find scoop marks and scratches that you know that are not from you. That's exactly right. Because, I mean, how do you do that to yourself in the middle of the night? You know, I get it. I know some people might have a pen or a pencil or I used to fall asleep when I was a kid. I'd fall asleep with pencils all the time in my pocket. I stabbed myself. I don't know how many times with that stuff, but you know, it happened as a kid, you know, and I know there's sometimes you can get a spider bite in the middle of the night, things like that. But when you have this kind of coherent thinking to where something happened to you, that's when this abduction becomes real, right? It is a real abduction. And then what comes after that is the actual confusion, right? The dizzy spells, the ringing of the ears, right? And I'm talking about this is after the abduction. Once you know that something has happened to you, these are the traits of what happens to you. If you've experienced this. Right? So it's almost like your navigation, let's just say the navigation in your body, right, of north and south and all that, it kind of goes wacko for a little bit because you're not able to comprehend what's happening to you. You're going through this confusion sort of state, right? And I just put a picture over here like a north and south, right, to where it's got like the magnetic pulses on both sides of it. Let's just say this is your brain, right? You're trying to figure out what's up and down, and you can't, right? So, because this is what everybody experiences during or after an abduction, right? They get nauseous. A lot of times they'll have burns, knots on their skin, scoop marks, of course. And then, like I said, the constant ringing of the ears. And it can be excruciating for you in your ears. And this does happen. It happens to me. I know I'm a musician, but there's a lot of times to where I felt that when I was living in New Mexico that maybe I experienced something that I was kind of hoping for, but then not hoping for, right? So now it's like I can't get out of it. Once I'm in it, I can't get out, right? And this is what pulls you in this direction after an abduction, right? It's like I always say in my podcast, once you see one, you can't unsee it anymore. And it gets stuck in your brain to where I got to find out what's wrong. I got to find out exactly what happened to me, and you start asking all these questions, right? And these are the traits of the actual abduction itself. And you're trying to figure out exactly, how do I get past all of that, right? Of course, we talked about the scoop marks. Snackbench always said she got some scoop marks as well, right? And these are them They get some little circle indentions at times, right? Where it's like something was pushed in or actually made you a mark on your body, right? I show a lot of these on my films because people need to see exactly what happens to folks during an abduction or after an abduction, right? Because it's not just, and I'm talking, what I'm getting to right here is the actual experience of the abduction and what comes with it. It's not going to be, hey, let me shake your hand. Let's go have a glass of tea. Let's drink a beer. Let's go talk. No, that ain't happening, man. None of that's happening. So the picture on the right you're seeing, this is from 3/28/2015. It shows a subject at the right hand on the top of the pic, at the top of the hand. It says the marks are 1 inch up from the wrist. And then they notice how the largest mark is almost square. You can see it. It's almost a square mark. And this was after an abduction. This is what they started getting. Almost a totally different color of the actual pigmentation of the skin, right? So this is what people go through. And this is what Regina Palmer went through. But hers was... they did an actual biopsy on her, right? So the biopsy with her, it was like they tore a piece of her flesh off, right? Or they cut a piece of her flesh off. And those are the traits of what happens to people during an abduction, right? Or after an abduction. And then how do you explain this to people when you wake up the next morning, right? You're like, man, how do I explain these marks on my body without people thinking I'm wearing a tinfoil hat or I'm crazy, right? How do you do that? You don't. A lot of people keep it to themselves. They take photos. I highly recommend you take any kind of photos of any special thing that you have on your body that that you didn't have before, right? If you woke up with it or you think this happened to you, take photos of it. Do a record of it, Facebook user says, we got them in the back of our knees and our thighs. People do that, and this is, they were white circles, not deep like those. And every abduction is going to be different. It's going to be a different extraterrestrial, right? It's going to be totally different of how the first one happened, right? Or if it's a different kind of extraterrestrial, we don't even know if it's, most of the times the extraterrestrial that's going to do this, it's going to be a gray. The big eyes, the big head, the little small 4 foot, 3 foot tall grays. These are the ones that, of extraterrestrial being that are actually doing this from Zeta Reticuli, right? And these are the ones that are studying a lot of our human beings and our human DNA, and extracting a lot of DNA, eggs, sperm, things like that, so they can procreate, so they can make more of themselves because they are not able to do so. This is what I read over the past. And then comes with the dreams of alien contact and symbols. This is after the abduction, right? So when usually majority of the people that do have this alien abduction will have a lot of dreams of alien contact, right? They'll see symbols. I've contacted a couple of people that have had close contact, in other words, like in a different realm with extraterrestrials, and they start drawing, these symbols. I think Mr. Richard Bowman, he was one of them that I had on my show. He's part of ASDP as well. He was actually drawing symbols because he was seeing these symbols. And it's a possibility that he could have actually been abducted as well. Now, it's hard to pinpoint the actual abduction itself because the burden of proof is always on who's ever telling the story, right? But you're trying to find the proof and trying to figure out if this did happen to a person. And everything that I'm telling you right now, this is the standard, the most 99 to 100% trait of the actual abduction, right? And this is exactly how this occurs in this, basically in this format, right? This is the format that it happens. And even the Betty Barney Hill story, she says she didn't get regression therapy. She goes, no, I didn't have to. It just came to me. It started coming to me little by little. Little by little, it came. It started. The dreams were coming. I started to remember. She goes, just wait. And that was one of them that I have on my podcast. She says, just wait. It'll come to you. You'll start remembering things that are happening to you without regression therapy. So, how do you, how in other words, what she was saying that they when they abducted Betty and Barney Hill back in 1961, that they didn't wipe her memory. She was totally coherent through the whole thing. She said she was talking to them, everything, right? The only one that wasn't was her husband. He was under some sort of a trance or something like that, right? Which he got major post-traumatic stress disorder from it. And Facebook user says you might want to mention that the times you find out the next day that the scoop marks when you wake up the next day. Yeah. And it's hard though, but you try to figure out a lot of these things that do happen to people, right? And even to yourself. And, how do you explain this, what happened to you without, breaking down, right? Or thinking people are, people thinking you're crazy or some sort, and which is not the actual fact, right? I mean, we couldn't be telling this story 20 years ago. I talk about that all the time. They would think we're freaking nuts, right? But who was telling these stories back then, right? You know who was? George Norrie, Coast to Coast. He was telling a lot of these stories on AM radio, and he was able to talk to people, and they would tell their stories of, alien abductions or things that they would see. I know because I was a truck driver. I'd listen to all of this stuff while it was happening. At the time, the UFO phenomenon, the disclosure wasn't really out there yet, right? I mean, people knew about UFOs, but they just didn't know. Not like they do now. And then this is the next step of what happens to probably about 10% of abductees. This doesn't happen to everybody. This only happens to like 10% that I've noticed. There's far few and in between stories of what happens next. Years later, after contact, they come and they show you the arrival and the visuals of children, right? That they used when they extracted eggs out of females or sperm out of males. They start telling you they start showing you the children. And then how do you explain that? I mean, most people that have gone through this state, once they see this, they say these children looked almost human, but they looked different. They were weird looking, but I knew they were mine. I knew they were mine. And they had like tearful, experiences about it because they knew that they had a little boy or a little girl that were an actual extraterrestrial. That was a part of them, right? And I'm only talking 10%. That they get to experience this phenomenon or afterwards, after the abduction. I'm talking years later, 10, 15, 20 years later. They got your number. They got your phone number, right? And they end up contacting you later, not through the phone, but I'm just saying that in a sense to where they're going to go to you again. And they get to show them the children. And there's a lot of studies. There was one study in England about this, right? And they actually made some kind of a report study of people that get abduction. I'm going to read a little bit of this to you. It says, the dilemma has been intensified by many reports involving apparent random abduction of ordinary citizens that are subjected to sexual violation, usually a part of laboratory-style breeding program. The abductors state the intention of producing the hybrid race of an offspring. And given by many millions of people who have now claimed to be an abductee, the experiences of intervention or invasion by the UFO or others can be said to be on the increase, right? So this number is going up of people that are actually going through this. But it says the imaginary involved of this hybrid breeding experience provides interesting case of the standpoint of imagination and psychology, right? It says the argument presented in this paper is a notion that the issue resulting into scientific but involuntary intercourse, right? So between the two worlds is symbolizing this, right? And it says for the evolutionary or revolutionary change of human consciousness. The form it takes follows from the embodiment as living in nature and its imaginary rebirthing of human nature as a vehicle of evolving consciousness and the hope for the future, right? It says some people alternatively report encounters with angels whose function in a human affairs such as common will be this worldly intention by aliens. So, and then it also says, it follows by the question, but are these UFO phenomena actually real or not? Can it be answered with common sense form? Right? Can it be answered? I mean, we have evidence of what happens to people, and everything that's on there is proof of fact that people do experience this phenomenon of extraction of eggs, right? And it's not always going to be the extraction part, like it said in this article, right? It could be through the intercourse. It could be through anything like that, right? That's going to make it go into a different kind of situation, right? Of a hybrid child. And most people, like I said, after they saw the children would come up to them and hold their hand and just talk to them telepathically, saying, I'm your son, I'm your daughter, it's okay. And they would all say that. They would say it. It's okay, right? But the regression part of the therapy, right? You start getting more regression. Once you start getting into the regression part of it, you start noticing that this isn't something that's going to be simple to remember at times, right? There's going to be harder parts of this to remember. You know, some of this could be really traumatic for some folks to experience the actual abduction itself. A lot of these things aren't nice. I mean, you know, you're watching an actual, this is part of the film Fire in the Sky. It was super traumatic from this guy, Travis Walton. Facebook user says, once it starts in for life, it may have some pause in between, but you always come back in another form, right? And this is where the PTSD comes in for a lot of these people that do experience this kind of phenomenon. Not the kind to where you're sitting there and you're kind of looking at people and you don't remember the actual examination, things like that. You know, he kind of regrets this. I heard Travis Walton talk about the trauma part of it. He says, maybe if I didn't fight like I did, maybe I would have had a different outcome. It wouldn't have been that bad, right? He says, and then it's just, maybe they were just trying to help me or some sort, you know. Maybe there was a different thought process of what they were going to do, right? But the experience that he went through was traumatic for him, right? Especially when you see the film, right? Of course, he says the film did dramatize it a lot more than it was, but only what he could remember. And remember, he was not in any state of paralysis. He was coherent when he woke up. Totally coherent. And that's the different part of people's abductions that they have and what they go through, right? You know, like I was talking before, the years after the years of contact, the children talk to them and they start telling them it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. It's, in other words, like, it's not your fault. We're okay. Right? And then after that, they have assurances that everything is okay. But my thing is, especially if being of, you did something to me without my permission, right? I didn't voluntarily do this. You took it from me, right? And basically, it's the same thing. And they're taking it from you again because they let you see the child and then they take the child from you, whether it's a part extraterrestrial or not. More than likely, it is going to be part extraterrestrial if you're sitting there looking at it. Facebook user says Dr. Mack was a pioneer of Bud Hopkins doing the regression and documenting this through the children were the biggest thing. I've seen drawings of images of children of what they saw. Humanoid with little hair. Facebook user says, we feel violated. Exactly. I mean, that's what I would feel. You know, if afterwards, this is what they took from you and then they take from you again. To me, it's more of it's going to hurt you more as a human being because we're human beings. We're compassionate. A lot of us are compassionate. You know, to especially with children and having children as mothers with their children, fathers with their children, right? And that part was taken from you, right? So it's going to leave you that thought process in your head. What did they do to me and why did they do this to me? It wasn't a good thing, right? I don't like the feeling of the afterwards. I don't like what I'm feeling now after they showed me my kids and then they take them from me, right? Knowing that they're not human, you won't be able to put them in society, right? Because what would happen? Probably the government would come take them from you. They're going to cut them up into all kinds of pieces, right? To try to figure out what they got there. And maybe that is the best thing for them to go, right? And these are the things you have to think about. At times, I think about this a lot, right? And this is why I'm telling you these stories right now, because these are the things that I think about of how these people are possibly feeling. Facebook user says the Browns are not very friendly, kind of mean. They smell bad. Just what I heard from different interviews of Travis Walton. That must be Terry Lynch. Facebook user says, I saw a very pregnant woman on the table next to mine. This is an abductee. You know, and these are the emotions that you're going through when these things are happening, right? And to me, it's a little cruel in a sense to, I mean, I was probably better off not knowing that I had children out there, right? Of part of a hybrid or whatever. You know, and how do you explain all that even to yourself? What did I just witness or experience, right? Facebook user says it's very hard when they wipe all your life memories. The paralysis is the worst thing. No way to completely describe. We have no choice, and other family members, like parents of your children, will also experience the same thing. You know, these are the things that happen to people. I'm going to give you this last story that I have here to share this with you guys, because this is part of a story that somebody went through, and I thought it was important. Facebook user says, sometimes I wish it was a dream. As of a lot of folks do after they experience this, because it's a horrible thing. So this story was a fourth kind, right? This was near Indiana, USA, June 30th, 1983, right? So during the night on June 30th, Kathy Davis, in one of her late 20s, saw lights seamlessly, it says. While she was searching through the yard of her house. Next day, she found a circular mark on the ground. She said it was about 8 foot long across, and a swath of dead grass about 3 feet wide, right? Typical saucer shape, right? Later, she starts thinking that something had happened to her, right? So she decided to go through hypnosis, therapy. So under this regression, it was conducted by New York Bud Hopkins, who went in to go investigate about the strange lights, being hit with a blast of radiation, and she was abducted aboard a UFO. It says a probe inserted into her abdomen during this time, and an object was implanted in her nose, like some kind of suction device was applied to her. She was abducted again October 3rd, 1983, while one late night trip in a store. The aliens showed her a child that she described as not looking like them. But she didn't look like any other, they say. She looked like an elf or an angel. The girl, named Tommy, understood was the result of her impregnation by the aliens during the earlier abduction in the 70s, following yet another apparent abduction in April of 1986. Tomei maintained that the aliens had told her that she had been impregnated, and the fetus was removed to be nurtured by aliens no fewer than 9 times. Right? So this is what she experienced as well. They did an assessment. It says these are quite outstanding claims. but the evidence is solely on the unsustained evidence of a single person testifying under hypnosis. As such, it would be not allowed, by evidence in the court of the United States, by her own account. Tomei has a long and varied history of physical ailments, which hardly suggests that would make her the ideal surrogate mother. And a supposedly technology superior to aliens wish to take advantage of her human genes. This is the assessment that Bud Hopkins did, right? And others. So they're trying to say, well, she wasn't really, a candidate for it, but how do you know, right? How are you going to know who the candidate is or who's not, or what, or they wanted her eggs, right? Facebook user says, when I was 8, 9, or 10, bloody noses were bad. Middle of the night, 30 minutes or more, just very, very bad. They say I felt like I was being dropped on the bed, thinking I rolled off with my PJs inside out and backwards, right? Says, so weird. I only got nosebleeds when I was in my first trimester. By then, they take my baby. And I wasn't pregnant anymore. Went through depression. This is a Facebook user that's talking right now. And they talked about the implants in her nose because they say that these implants are this is your tracking device, right? And it says the nose is one of the most heavily microbe infested parts of the human body. And now I see it in different parts of the body, not just nose. I mean, they extract these, transmitters or probes from people's back, of course, the back of the leg, and the back of the thigh, and they have your muscle areas now. But just going back to the reunion of the hybrid children and to assure you that everything is okay. I mean, to me, it's, I don't know. Like I said, and me personally, I would probably not want to know than to know. Because it would hurt me more to know that I had a, star child out there or whatever, that I didn't know anything about or how they were doing. It's kind of, to me, it's a little cruel, to understand that what exactly happened to you and you have to go through all the process of PTSD, and then you got to think about, okay, was this my subconscious, making these things up, right? As it was going along. Or did I experience something, right? And this is what science always does. This is what doctors always do. They break this down into science more than to actual physical, right? Because when you have when you have physical evidence of something that has happened to somebody, you have the actual cuts, you have the time and date, you have witnesses stating they saw something, or if you had a witness with you, right? That, to me, that would give more of a concrete evidence of an actual abduction or things that have happened, right? Instead of thinking that the regression tapped into your subconscious. Now, I've heard this before, to where they think that a lot of regression therapy, when they tap into your subconscious, that you made this up all in your mind and you made all of it up, to where it's not true, right? And this is what happens through some regression therapy doctors, right? So they'll think it was just you, your subconscious, that did this, where it didn't happen. You know, once you have the body marks, right? No, it didn't happen. I think it's a different story. The confusion, the dizzy spells, the ringing of the ears. Oh, that didn't happen? Something happened, right? The loss of time. That didn't happen? Why did my watch stop? Why did it break? Why does the clock in my car still say the same time it does on my wristwatch, but the time at the house is totally different, right? So that didn't happen? The abduction process, the visual, the approach, the actual abduction, did that happen? I got photos of it. I got video of it, right? But that didn't happen? See, this is the difference between a lot of these psychological doctors out there. They try to make you think that you're nuts, right? A lot of these stories that are being told out there, they had to, they had to find some kind of fault, right? In you to make you think that this didn't happen to you, right? Oh no, you've been sick a long time. There's no way they needed that. They needed you. Your blood's bad. They don't need that kind of blood. Why would they want that kind of blood? It's perfect, right? They need perfect stuff because they're perfect aliens, right? How do you know what they wanted at the time, right? This is who we are at Alien Strand Disclosure Project, right? This is what I am, and this is what Terry Lynch is, and this is what all of us are, representatives at Alien Strand Disclosure Project, right? We're here to protect you, and we're here to be the voice for you. We're the voice of the voiceless, right? A lot of times it's hard to speak, and it's hard to talk about this stuff. Facebook user says, my mom and I had missing time and missing miles driving down the road from Washington to Southern California. Another Facebook user says, it stopped with me now. My kids have not had any abductions, but they do see things. YouTuber Snackbed says, I read all about Hopkins, but the government documents now say that they were missing fetuses. This came out recently. Wow. There you go. It only took, 30, 40 years for them to say that. I'm glad they did, because we need to know what's going on out there. We're seeing these UFOs, extraterrestrial crafts, almost every day, on a daily basis, all over the world. Then for us to explain to you what happens during an abduction process, right? And this stuff is not a laughing or joking matter, because I've personally, one-on-one, talked to a lot of these folks. I'm not saying I'm a Bud Hopkins or any of these guys, but I think my open mind is more open to more concrete evidence and to the facts to point the direction that it should go, right? Which is that way. And knowing that these, wonderful human beings, individuals, did experience something. Now, out of all of these folks out there, that I've talked to throughout the years, every single one of them has been a humbled, loving person, good people. When they talk to me about it, very scared. But they do know that we are all here for them, and to understand and to tell their stories. And that's what a lot of my films are about. The middle part 2, the middle part 3, and the final episode will be the middle part 4. That's it. That's going to tell everything that all these films are going to tell exactly what you need to know about abductions, the process, the visuals, everything that's involved in an actual CE1, CE2, CE3, CE4. They say I had one hybrid presentation in my 20s. There's nothing for years and years. Then I saw her again in 2020 when I demanded to know where she was. I guess they're talking about a hybrid child. Say this is messed up. Sometimes you feel helpless or just crazy. That's how people make you feel sometimes, especially if they don't know what's really happening to us, this user says. Snackbish says, memories from my childhood have come back and forth. I've confirmed with parents. They found me as a small child everywhere but my bed. Now it's happening to my daughter. It would be painful to know I have a kid out there, right? And you just might. Facebook user says, this makes me mad when we try to tell others about all of this, how we're being treated like we're nuts, but we don't know what's happening to us. Those who have not had any like ours, in other words, experiences, will never understand unless it happens to them. And let's hope it doesn't happen to more people, because, it does have some kind of mental anguish that comes along with this, right? This is exactly what happens. This is the hardest subject to talk about, but this does happen under our noses daily, right? I mean, everybody's just chiming in right now because they want to talk about this. This is something that has touched many people out there, male and female, right? One user says, watching my daughter go through her experiences, I witnessed part of it. After they dropped her off, she ran to the window. We both saw the stars shoot off. I didn't know what happened to her. That's like you scratching your head in the morning like, what the heck? Did that just happen, right? Terry Lynn says, we're going to try to make contact in the middle part 4. And you will see these folks that are on these films explain, and just look into their eyes when they're talking. Listen to their voices. Listen to the crackle of their voices. Listen to the scaredness of how they're explaining these stories. Because that's the important part. Knowing that they experience something beyond your understanding. And that's the hardest part to explain. So we put them in these films so you guys can understand them, right? I'll put a link to these films on after this podcast today. But I'm glad you guys stuck around today. I'm ending this podcast now. I hope you guys enjoyed the content that I've spoken about tonight. It was very difficult for a few of you guys out there on Facebook that have been through experiencing these abductions that have happened to you throughout the years. And I'm glad you were able to talk about it a little bit tonight while I was on the show, on the air. We are live right now on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Catch us there. If you missed this podcast, catch us on all these podcasts. Go back, listen to a lot of our past podcasts, because those have a lot of great stories and episodes in there for you guys to watch. I thought today was an important podcast. Please share this podcast if you thought it was important for people to watch and listen. And I hope I explained it to you guys to understand exactly what a lot of these people do go through. I really appreciate all of you guys. Facebook user says, as usual, disclosure, thank you, Donald Ledesma. Says, thank you, guy. Facebook user says, last time I had paralysis, they let me go. Now I could go with them on my own. YouTube user says, sorry for the commenting so much. I wanted people to know that they aren't alone, and I'm fighting for disclosure for everyone, for my daughter's sake, for the most. And it's still happening in real time. All of this is very important. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. Catch us on the next podcast. Until then, you guys have yourselves a good day. Have yourselves a good evening. And have yourselves a good night. We'll see you on the next one.